Okay, here to finish up chapter 3, right? I want to get through this today. So up to this point, you should know your protein structure. We know about amino acids, dehydration synthesis. We know we progress from a primary structure to a secondary. We must achieve the tertiary structure. And then we may or may not get into the quaternary structure, right? So that should be knowledgeable to you. So the whole point, the whole aspect of a protein is the protein shape. So the shape, the three-dimensional shape of the protein is the most critical aspect. It determines how it functions. If we think about certain tools, right? Maybe surgical tools. A scalpel has a certain shape and it's going to be different than the little tweezers of the forceps, right? They're different shapes and they do certain functions. Carpenter's tools, right? A hammer is a different shape than a screwdriver, is a different shape than a saw, right? So each one of them is a different shape because it has a particular function, or the shape allows for a particular function. So the same thing here. An enzyme protein is a different shape than a muscle protein, right? And they do different things, right? A hemoglobin protein is different shape than a ligament protein because they do different things. An antibody is different shape than a muscle, right? So each protein family has a particular shape which allows it to do a certain function. So what is the most important aspect of a protein? Its shape. And that gets us to this sort of ugly concept, protein denaturation, right? Denaturation. What is denaturation? When the protein loses its three-dimensional shape. Oh man, it took so much time, so much effort to build the three-dimensional shape, and now we lose the three-dimensional shape. Now, don't confuse, right? We're not breaking the protein apart. We're not hydrolyzing the protein. All we're doing is we're changing the shape, right? So we're not, it's still a protein, but it's not in the right configuration. So when protein denaturation happens, bad things occur, right? So we have detrimental effects in the function. Once we denature, normally it's not gonna renature. It's not gonna go back and reconfigure to the right shape. It stays denatured. What can cause denaturation? Extreme temperature, very hot temperature, very, very cold temperature. Extremes in pH, very strong acids, very strong alkaline substances, radiation, which can cause oxidation, reduction. So a lot of these things can happen to our protein. So we got to kind of keep protein safe. We got to keep them in sort of moderate pHs, moderate temperatures, avoiding strong radiation sources. So proteins do a lot for us, but at the molecular level, they're sort of delicate too. So this picture, I think, is a really good illustration of denaturation. So this ribbon represents the amino acid chain. And it's got our secondary, alpha helices there. And this is normal, right? This is how that protein should have configured. We look over here and this protein, the ribbon looks just not as complicated, right? The ribbon hasn't been torn. We haven't hydrolyzed the protein. It's still protein. All the amino acid chain is intact, but it's just got a different shape. So this protein is no longer tertiary. This protein can no longer function. Or if it functions, it doesn't function the correct way. Reminds me a lot of maybe like somebody that's really complicated. Before they go to the party, they're talking about physics and they're walking in a straight line. They have great bladder control. And then late at the party, they can't even talk. They can't even kind of walk straight. Maybe they lost bladder control. I don't know. But again, they kind of go backwards. Instead of getting more complex, they kind of revert back to a more primitive state. And that's kind of denaturation. Luckily for your buddy, they're going to sober up, right? But if this is a protein, that most proteins can't renature. They can't go back and get more complex. So I stole these pictures off the internet here, but I see a baby that's gone through some sort of, I would say, burn. This lady, I think she was in some sort of traffic accident, I'm not sure. Um, but everyday English, we would say, oh, that's a burn, right? Burn of heat, burn of some chemical situation, right? When we talk about burn in the chemical level, we talk about denaturation, right? The heat was too intense for this skin protein, so that skin protein has been denatured. That little ear is just gone, you know? All that scar tissue, skin tissue, the eye, with the eye is made up of a lot of protein. That eye has been denatured, is damaged, right? So once this happens, this child can grow up, let's say they're 20 years old. You're probably still going to be able to see evidence, some scarring of that accident, right? Because once these proteins get denatured, they don't renature. So you don't want to be denaturing proteins, because once they're gone, they're gone. Yeah. So again, I would say 95% of the proteins, once they're denatured, they stay denatured. A very odd protein. We talk about hair. Hair is technically not even a living protein, but hair can renature. Those of you that have real pretty curly hair, say, I don't like my curlies, right? So you get these hot, like, denaturing tool. You put a lot of heat and you break up the little bonds of these little alpha helices, and it causes the hair to go flat. But eventually that hair will renature, right? If you have real pretty straight hairs, I don't like my straight hair. You then kind of put these chemicals in there to cause these spirals, or these these different variations that you can cause on the hair. But again, most normal tissue, once it's denatured, will not renature. So important distinction there. So with that, again, short, sweet, to the point. We're done with chapter 3. So an important molecule, we're going to cover proteins throughout the whole semester. So I want you to get a solid foundation on them, understand their structure, understand what can happen if they're not in the right structure. And hopefully all that's making sense, right? So keep an eye out for the next Pearson homework and the next Labster assignment. With that, y'all have a good rest of your day.